What do you hold on to when everything around you is falling apart? What happens when the storm doesn't pass and hope begins to slip away? And in the middle of chaos, where do you find a voice strong enough to believe? The journey had already taken a dangerous turn. What started as a calculated decision to move forward quickly became a fight for survival. At first, the wind seemed gentle, almost inviting. It gave the illusion that everything was under control. The sailors believed they had made the right choice, but the sea had other plans. Without warning, a violent wind swept down, fierce, relentless, and impossible to resist. The ship was caught in its grip, thrown off course, driven wherever the storm decided. Control was no longer in the hands of the crew. They were no longer navigating, they were surviving. The waves rose higher, crashing against the sides of the ship with unforgiving force. The sky turned dark, swallowing the light. Day and night blended into one endless struggle. There was no direction, no visibility, no certainty. Only fear. The sailors did everything they could. They secured the lifeboat, fearing it might be lost. They wrapped ropes around the hull to hold the ship together, a desperate attempt to keep it from breaking apart under the pressure. They lowered anchors, hoping to slow their drift. Every action was urgent, every decision driven by instinct. But the storm did not weaken, it only grew stronger. The next day, they began throwing cargo overboard. Valuable goods, once the reason for the journey, were now discarded without hesitation. Survival had become the only priority. By the third day, even the ship's equipment was thrown into the sea. Everything that once mattered no longer did. Time passed, but the storm did not. The sun disappeared, the stars vanished. Without them, navigation was impossible. They were lost, not just physically, but emotionally. And then something even heavier settled in. Hope began to fade. Luke, who recorded this journey, describes it with striking honesty. After many days without seeing the sun or stars, the crew finally gave up all hope of being saved. This is the moment when the storm becomes more than external. It enters the heart. Because as long as there is hope, there is strength. But when hope is gone, even the strongest person can feel defeated. The ship was still afloat, but the people inside were sinking. And in the middle of that darkness, Paul stood up. He had warned them before. He had seen this coming, but now was not the time to remind them of their mistake. This was not a moment for blame. It was a moment for something greater. Paul addressed everyone on board, the sailors, the soldiers, the prisoners. His voice cut through the fear, not with panic, but with calm authority. He acknowledged what had happened. Yes, they should have listened. Yes, this storm could have been avoided. But he did not stop there. He brought something they had lost: hope. Paul told them not to be afraid, not because the storm would suddenly stop, but because something had been revealed to him. He shared that during the night, an angel had stood beside him, sent from God. The message was clear and powerful. Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. In that moment, everything changed. The storm was still raging. The waves had not calmed. The darkness remained. But now, there was a promise. Not one life would be lost. The ship might be destroyed. The journey would not go as planned. But the people, every single one, would survive. Paul didn't just share the message. He believed it. And that belief became the anchor that the entire ship needed. Keep up your courage, he said. I have faith that it will happen just as I was told. Think about that. In a situation where all visible evidence pointed to disaster, Paul chose to trust something unseen. While others relied on what they could measure, the wind, the waves, the sky, Paul relied on a promise. This is the turning point of the story. Not when the storm ends, but when hope returns. Because sometimes the most powerful change doesn't happen in the circumstances. It happens inside the people facing them. The crew had lost control of the ship. They had lost direction. They had lost their sense of security. But now they were being offered something different, a reason to keep going. Faith does not always remove the storm. Sometimes it gives you the strength to endure it. The situation remained critical. The ship continued to drift. The danger was still real. But something had shifted in the atmosphere. Fear was no longer the only voice. There was now a counterweight, a steady, confident assurance that they would make it through. Paul's words did more than inform. They stabilized. In moments of crisis, people look for something to hold on to. When systems fail and plans collapse, they need something deeper, something unshakable. Paul became that source, not because of his position, but because of his conviction. He didn't control the storm. He didn't command the crew, yet his presence influenced everyone on board. This reveals a powerful truth. Leadership is not always about authority. Sometimes it's about clarity in the middle of confusion. The storm continued for days. The struggle did not end immediately, but now they were not just surviving blindly, they were holding on to a promise. And that changes everything. When people believe there is an outcome beyond the storm, they endure differently. Their actions shift. Their mindset strengthens. They find energy where there was once exhaustion. Hope doesn't remove difficulty, it redefines it. Instead of seeing the storm as the end, they begin to see it as part of a journey that will lead somewhere. Paul made it clear that the ship would run aground on an island. The journey would not end the way they expected. There would still be loss, but not loss of life. And sometimes that distinction matters more than anything. It's easy to measure success by what is preserved, plans, possessions, comfort. But in moments like this, the value of life itself becomes the focus. Everything else becomes secondary. The storm strips away illusions. It reveals what truly matters. And in doing so, it creates space for something deeper to emerge. Trust, not in circumstances, but in something beyond them. Paul's faith was not based on what he saw. It was based on what he believed. And that belief became contagious. Even those who may not have shared his faith began to rely on his words. In the absence of other options, they held on to the one voice that offered certainty. This is often how transformation begins, not through force, but through influence, not through control, but through consistency. Paul remained steady while everything else shifted, and that steadiness became a guide for others. The storm, though destructive, became a stage for something powerful. It revealed character, it tested decisions, and it highlighted the difference between fear and faith. As the waves continued to crash and the wind howled without mercy, one thing became clear. The outcome was no longer defined by the storm. It was defined by the promise. And that promise carried them forward, one moment at a time. Because sometimes survival is not about escaping the storm immediately. It's about holding on long enough for the promise to unfold. The journey to Rome was far from over, but in the middle of chaos, something unbreakable had taken root. Hope had returned, and with it, the strength to endure whatever came next. Thank you for watching this video. If this message encouraged you or gave you something to reflect on, don't forget to like, follow Holy Path Insights, and share this video so others can also find hope in the middle of their storms.